Let's launch into it then. So Rob, we're here to talk about this RFR hotline. Um, can you tell me how you even what your first uh, how you first became even aware that RFR was doing this?
Yes, interestingly, it's the same way that a lot of the callers tell me. I'll not all the time, but often ask a caller somewhere in the conversation, oh, how'd you hear about us? And more often than not, it's the atheist experience, the podcast, or, videos from their broadcasted on TV, web TV. So yeah, that's how I found out about it. And I've known about it for quite a long time. The hotline was the first thing that was implemented, and that's often all that ever gets talked about, although it's a lot more than that. But that is what they'll often mention to a caller, if they can't spend enough time with them, or they think our services would help them. They're very good about that. And as are the other ACA shows. I listened to a few of the other ones, especially Talk Heathen and Truth Wanted, especially Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience often will point their callers to call us. And so if I ask somebody, a lot of times that's where they've heard of us, and that's where I heard of them.
And you mentioned you
10 years,
mentioned
probably. I've heard about them for 10 years, probably, frankly.
you mentioned ACA as an umbrella group for podcasts that you.
No, sorry. So there is a huge community in Austin, Texas. Texas isn't usually thought about it as a bastion of atheism or secularism or humanism or progressivism, but Austin, the capital, is different. It's kind of like San Francisco. I don't know how that happened historically, but it is. And it's one of the oldest, and it is indeed the largest atheist activist humanist communities in the United States. This is in Austin. And the organization is called the Atheist Community of Austin, affectionately called the ACA. And they're the ones who started the Atheist Experience 20 years ago, something like that. And now they're up to like 7 shows or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You were telling me as we were speaking earlier that the recovering from religion is obviously more than just the hotline, and you were telling me that in addition to the podcasts and sort of broadcast stuff, there's also a number of sort of services, everything from a blog to sort of an offline opportunity to interact and help people. And there was something that you wrote to me called the Secular Therapy Project.
Yeah, that was one of the big efforts. So it's not directly connected to RFR, but I'll say it's an offshoot. So what that is was a project where our founder, Dr. Darrell Ray, who was a psychologist himself, realized that there's a problem in the United States with getting counseling, psychological therapy, where you go to a therapist, you devote maybe many sessions to getting to know them, to them getting to know you, to feeling comfortable, and then all of a sudden, okay, let's deal with your problem now. Let's pray to Jesus. And that's a problem if the person who's gone in does not believe in Jesus or prayer. So that happens, unfortunately, very frequently. So what he decided to do was to create this sort of a matchup system where we would allow clients to search a database for therapists who've been vetted that they don't do that. And also, on the other end of it, it allows therapists to get clients like that by sort of advertising, just within our system, putting their name out there. I mean, because this is another unfortunate thing. You could be a therapist and be totally secular, right? But you might have religious clients. Most people in this country are religious. They might not be dealing with religious issues specifically. But in the therapy, you're not going to tell them to pray to Jesus. You're going to use science-based methods to try to help them out in their system, right? So that's all good. But the truth is, a lot of religious folks would not like to see an ad for yourself in the local papers or whatever that you're an atheist and you're seeking atheist clients. They might stop seeing you. So therefore, it lets the therapists also advertise their services in this kind of undercover way that they can only be found by people looking for that service and not by your general run-of-the-mill possible client. So, we don't take any funding from it, and it's not a direct thing, as I said, for us, but we have the service directly linked from our website to their direct website, and we help people if there's problems, finding a therapist there or whatever. So that's what that's about. And of course, it's a therapist, so you pay them. However, they're individuals, and they take insurance or they don't take insurance or whatever. You'd have to work that out with the person that you contact, just like you would if you had found them in a directory anywhere else. But so it's not directly ours, but it's a paid service. Everything else we do is is free because it's a volunteer organization.
That's great. I think that if I was seeking counseling, I would want to know that existed, and I would clearly use it. So getting back to the hotline, how did you get involved with that?
Yeah, so the hotline is the first thing that happened with this organization. I don't remember the Secular Therapy Project setting that up as a second, but the hotline was the first. And it's the one that I said, because it's been around the longest, in some cases, it's the only thing that's known about us. So even the people on the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen, the ACA shows, if they mention it, it's just, hey, they have a hotline, call them. They don't know about the other things we do, which we can talk about later. But yeah, so that was all I knew about because I heard about it on the ACA, and I said, oh, I got some free time because of the pandemic. I'm home now more than I have been. And by the way, I retired because of the pandemic, so I had some free time on my hands. And I said, yeah, I had always thought about this would be an interesting thing to do. It seemed like, ooh, I could be like taking calls on the Atheist Experience. Let's see how that goes. So I looked up on their website, and there's a bunch of tabs at the top, which is recoveringfromreligion.org, by the way. And right across the top, there's tabs, and one of which is, hey, volunteer your time. So I clicked the button, and there was a little application, little thing to read first to make sure you were appropriate. I said, yeah, I could do this, and I volunteered. And within a week or so, well, I pretty much immediately got an email back, saying they had gotten it. And then within a week or so, I got a email saying, okay, when are you available? I gave him some times. The next day I got one, okay, expect a call from Anthony, 1 o'clock Tuesday, whatever it was. And that was a little interesting story in and all of itself. There is a person who's very famous for a thing called street epistemology named Anthony Magnabosco. And he's got his website on that subject. It's how you have difficult conversations with people about strongly held beliefs. And I knew this guy because I had listened to hundreds of hours of his videos. And that was Anthony Magnabosco interviewing me. So it was bizarre.
Yeah, but that must have been pretty fun, and to be interacting with him.
Yeah, but he had a script. I said,
Mhm.
I started asking questions. Oh, sorry, Rob, I can't do this. I have like 20 people to interview today, and I got no free time. So, but it was very weird. And he said something like, "I'm going to have to stop doing this because too many people know my voice."
So was there some sort of training that you went through before they let you loose on the
Indeed there was. And so that was in the olden days of April, and a lot has changed in the organization since then. So more appropriate to talk about what one would do now, I think, if one was a volunteer, how you get trained up. Yeah, for quite a number of years, we had a director of volunteer training, and he finally decided to give himself an actual retirement. He had retired from a job, and he was doing RFR full time, and it was crazy. He was doing more than the hotline. And so he retired, and then they needed like 5 or 6 people to fill all the work he was doing. And when that happened, as happens, people say, hey, how can we improve this? Let's do this better. Put your heads together, come up with better ways we could have do this. And that happened in a short order. So in the last 3 months or 4 months, the whole training process has been improved. So I can talk about that if you want, about like what somebody would go through now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to go through it in a lot of detail, but just to give a sense of how long it took.
Yeah. So basically,
and I guess also I'm interested in like what they were trying to prepare you for, or to make sure that you wouldn't do,
Yeah.
the do's and don'ts at a high level that you were asked.
Yeah. So you watch a bunch of videos first. And after the first one is an introduction by Gail Jordan, who's our executive director. Thanking you for volunteering. And she points you to all the other videos. There's a document which you go through, and it says which ones to watch. And yes, an important point of it is what we don't do, right? And we do not try to deconvert people. I have had angry callers calling, accusing us of that. That is not what we do. One of the things is we meet people where they are. That's a big thing. And this is to train you on how to do that. We've learned the methods of street epistemology that I mentioned before, that Anthony Magnabosco, who's on our board, by the way. Well, he's a member. Maybe I'm not sure if he's on the board of directors, but definitely involved with the organization. And we're very big into street epistemology. You don't challenge people, you meet them where they're at, that sort of a thing. So you get that kind of training. And we have had some people call because they thought they were going to be like Matt Dillahunty, that's not appropriate. And in fact, a funny story maybe, Matt Dillahunty had at one point volunteered to be a helpline agent for RFR. And if people know Matt, he's a great spokesman, and but his personality would be very difficult to rein in, I think, on volunteer helpline, to not challenge people and not push back and meet people where they are. So he actually didn't make it through the training. Don't know the whole story behind that, but he said he was just like too busy at that point. It was probably early on when he started to do, his own shows and his own doing debates across the country, and he said he just got too busy, and which is true. His voice as it is in his forums is more effective than just being one helpline agent on RFR.
Mm-hmm. So when you're, I guess first I should ask, so how often are you on call?
So yeah, that's different for different people. So one of the things that's different in the olden days from when this started, somewhere within the decade to now, is it was run more like a business would be, where you signed up for a schedule, right? You're going to do Monday through Tuesday. These times you'll be on. Wednesday through Friday you'll be in this times. You had your own amount of time, but you would say when you were going to be monitoring. And we don't do that anymore. We now have enough volunteers where we still miss calls and chats, by the way. So we're not at 100% by far, but it's much better than it was in the days when there were only a few volunteers. And therefore, it's just whatever you can do. No one asks anyone when you're going to be managing the system.
So you just see that people are interested in interacting on a website?
No, we have there are two ways. Our helpline is actually two things. It's a phone line and it's a chat line. The phone line can be reached from a phone, or there's a button on our website which says call in anonymously. But in both of those cases, it goes to the same system on our end. It's a phone call coming in. There's also a button on the website which is chat, and it just opens a chat like you would in any other company or whatever, and a text comes in. So basically, we use software which pushes to your device. It's a phone or your PC that, hey, the chat channel has a new thing in there. Go look at it, and then you can accept it or not.
Okay, and then with the phone, it's like some sort of hunt group, like for a call center.
Hunt, I don't know that term.
Well, is it sort of like a call center where you just get randomly?
No, everyone gets the notice at the same time that there's a call coming in.
Oh, okay, and somebody picks it.
Yeah. You check the box and say, I'm going to take this, and then you pick it up.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and 99.9% of the time that works. If we have new people, sometimes they don't realize they have to check it first. And every once in a while, like I've said, hello, can I help you? And the guy's already saying, hello, can I help you? And that's a little embarrassing. But most of the time, that doesn't happen.
So now getting sort of to the experience that you have, like what have you experienced? Like, how do callers behave, and
it runs a gamut.
Or are they mostly looking for affirmation?
I didn't hear the first part of the question.
I was asking whether, how they behave, and then are they looking for resources and specific help, or are they sometimes just looking for a degree of affirmation and
Definitely both or either of those things. And the majority of the calls, from my personal experience, is people who are recently, and it's a general term. To some people, recently is a few weeks. Sometimes it's even a year or more. I've decided they're an atheist, or put it this way, aren't sure they believe anymore, and want affirmation and or resources. They don't usually say, "Hey, what do you have to tell me this?" But they're calling. A big one is they're afraid they're making a mistake. It's Pascal's wager. Is either just occurred to them by themselves, or they've been told that by religious people. What if you're making a mistake? You should just say you believe. Or in their own head, they've come to the conclusion that they're a lot of times, I'm rationally pretty sure there's no my religion is bunk, but I still wake up dreaming that I'm going to hell. And that's a big one. Indoctrination puts these thoughts in people's heads, and it's emotional, and it's very hard to get out of some people, not everyone, but some people never get over that. So that's a big one. The other large category of things is people having relationship issues, or fearing that they're about to have relationship issues because they haven't told anyone yet, but they need to for some reason. That's a big one. Sometimes I've had one where it was, my wife and I got married in the church. It was because we both love Jesus, and now I don't believe in Jesus anymore, and I haven't told her that. That's going to destroy our relationship. Things of that. I've had calls from children who are afraid to say something to their parents. One of the most heartbreaking one was a 15-year-old girl who was fundamentalist, raised as a fundamentalist Christian, going to a fundamentalist school, or for friends of fundamentalists in the school, can't tell anybody, and somehow she heard about us and called us. And that was nice to give her somebody to talk to.
And in a case like that, especially for a minor, but anyone who is either financially or emotionally dependent on people who have certain expectations that they're still in the fold, do you ever or often recommend that people stay in the closet, at least for the time being, just in order to preserve their station in life?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word recommend, and that's one of the things we don't do. We're trained not to do, because we're not therapists. I mean, even therapists technically aren't supposed to recommend something, right? They'll make you think through something and come to your own conclusion about what's better in your life. And we'll go even more in that direction. We'll let's think about this, and what do you think about this? That kind of a thing. But yeah, that definitely is something. So one of my most egregious things like that was a person who was calling in because he was, let's see, he was physically challenged, couldn't get out of the house himself anymore, and this was going on for several years. I think it was diabetes, had ruined his legs, and he had the support of some Mormons who had befriended him, and they were being very nice about it. They were, bringing him groceries, taking him to doctor visits, or whatever like that. But with his calling, he got to the point now where it was, okay, you will come to the temple and be baptized as a Mormon, or goodbye. And he didn't know what to do. So that was a difficult conversation.
Yeah, especially when the people they're dependent on are sort of escalating.
Yep.
It's one thing to keep up a charade, and the other
Yeah.
to
So I talked about his options, and it really, I think it came down to he was going to go through with the baptism. And it's like, so they sprinkle some water on you and say some magic words. Like, if you really need these people to keep you alive, you got to make the decision, Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was unfortunate. I mean, so one of the things that is really nice about the way this has evolved with RFR is that since we're more than the helpline now, we have a whole online community. That one of the things we tend to do is invite people to that if it's appropriate.
Mhm. Right. So then you can connect them up with other ways to seek advice or commiseration or
Exactly.
resources, various sorts. Yeah.
Yeah, that's become a big thing. So the other large category of people calling in, and they might not say this outright, or sometimes they do, but they need community now, because their lives have been ripped out from their community just because they've changed their mind about something, right? They don't feel they can go back to their church. They're being hypocrites. They're sometimes disowned by the rest of their family and friends, and they have nobody to talk to. So we have a whole online organization, and also chats like this, which we have all the time on different subjects, where people can Zoom talk to each other, and it gives them a way to have a set of peers who've been through similar things that they can talk this out with and feel better about.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and I would tell this to people in our group that um, while religions tend to be very purist, um, humanism is not, and so don't feel like it's a horrible thing that you're doing if you're not um, always carrying the flag of humanism in all your interactions. There are some times where it's best to, when in Rome, do like the Romans, and it's not always demanded of you that you call things out and demonstrate your humanism in everything that you do. And so just like in a job, you sometimes have to, you know, not keep your head down or make some compromises. Um, if you need to make some compromises in order to live your life, just express your humanism in the ways that are available to you, and that's all we can expect. Um, and I think there are a lot of people who don't realize that that's a way of being, and feel because they've come from a very dogmatic viewpoint that any alternative has to be an equally dogmatic but just different viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah. So another category of people I get, a lot of these are mixed up. I'll get people with multiple issues, in the conversation, you understand what's going on with these things. They're very upset that now that they've seen the light, that they can't easily convince their spouse or their friends or their kids who they've indoctrinated over there that, oh, sorry, I was wrong, you're wrong now. And it just, how come I'm giving them the same evidence that turned my mind? Why aren't they listening to me? So that's a whole nother thing. And then because people don't do that, people go into what's been called the angry atheist phase. And so sometimes I'll try to talk people down from that, like rationalize why that's not the only response, or maybe it's not the best response, especially for yourself. Yeah. And my insight in that from stuff I've been read is, I'll use the example of North Korea sometimes. So you live in a dictatorship where the president has spies all over the place, including your neighbors. And if they hear you saying anything about him, you might be executed as well as the rest of your family. So imagine living in a place where in your brain you believe not only that's true, but he can read your mind, right? And if you even entertain the doubt because someone asked you a question, you're going to hell forever. So that's like a wall in somebody's brain, and that might be the reason they're not listening to your logic, because they can't go there. So if you look at someone like that, that's more of now you feel sorry for them as opposed to you're angry at them. So that has helped some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, we who are not enmeshed in a religious context can look at North Korea and think that that's this very scary and but remote thing that we can sort of pity but not worry about. But I would say that for people who are involved in a very invasive religious community, and there are many of those in this country in all different faith traditions, that it is not dissimilar to North Korea.
Yeah, except the person is omnipotent and all powerful.
Right. I mean, maybe the sanctions aren't quite as great. It's not immediately being thrown in prison, but the level of
Oh,
fear
to them it's worse. Your immortal
disowned.
soul is damned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's why people don't want in surveys, atheists are seen as more evil than any other category of people. Convicted child rapists or let out of prison would be voted for president more than an atheist in some surveys. I think I'm only slightly exaggerating it. It's because, like, you might convince their child that they've gone through the trouble of indoctrinating that, oh, that's not right, and then what have you done? You've damned their immortal soul. It's worse than actually raping them.
Hmm. So is there a particular call that you'll always remember? I know you mentioned the one about the ones helped by Mormons. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, recently we've had sometimes we get repeat callers, much like they do on the shows, the Atheist Experience, etc. There's a woman, 17, called in numerous times. I took it twice, and I think I saw her number come up, at least 2 or 3 other ones that other agents were talking to her. And she was raised Catholic and then went to, I don't know, 17 year in college yet, maybe it's high school still, but her some students, friends that she knew, dragged her into this cult where everything in her life is because of demons. She has gone through multiple exorcisms. She's got a headache, it's a demon, whatever. It was horrible, and to convince her. So she was questioning, and she was basically looking for affirmation that this isn't right. But it was very hard because all the logical biases that have been programmed into her now, confirmation bias, every little sign means the demons are real, and it's, well, we'd examine the logical fallacies and things like that. And she'd seem to understand, but then, a day later she'd call back in with another thing that's very similar, where it's not really getting through to her that this is in, your imagination, that there's no evidence that there's demons or possessions. But there was a little hope because she kept calling back that she maybe will change her mind and come out of it. So, but that's kind of sad to hear. So the other thing, I pick on Christians a lot because that's most of the calls we get, because that's the population. But we're international, by the way. We do get calls from other countries, so occasionally I've had Muslims, but mostly it's Christians, and it's mostly doctrinaire religious backgrounds. Fundamentalist Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, that kind of thing. But I've gotten several calls from the Orthodox Hasidic Jewish community, and those have been very difficult too, because one of the things you mentioned, the resources, Eric, one of the things we do is give people resources on our website, other places, and these people had no access to the internet. So it astounds me, 21st century, but yeah. Is it one of them? I have a kosher phone. A what? I associate kosher with a way of treating food. No, that means that you can't access the internet because that's forbidden. So, they've approved this butchered kind of a phone, whatever that is, that you have no internet access.
And once somebody calls in, if they want to speak to that same person again, do they have a way to get to that same person again? Or
so if we have a call that goes that way and they say they'd like to speak to me again, what I'll do is say, I'll give them my name and say, yeah, you can ask for me, there's no guarantee. But another thing we have is we offer a schedule call in on RFR. So that's on our main site, and there's a button that says schedule a call. So then you get a little form that pops up. It says what time to call you back, and you can put a note, I'd like to talk to Robert. That works.
Okay.
Yeah.
That gives some continuity to people. That's
Yep.
great.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about other types of callers we've had, but a lot of times it's women who are fed up with the patriarchy in their particular congregation. That's an issue. Why they've lasted as long as they did, I don't know, but there's usually some straw that broke the camel's back, and something happened with the pastor or something that their husband was believed and they weren't, about something or other, or with kids, and that gets them to call. Yeah, and in those cases, sometimes we're not, they don't want to be talked out of a religion. We're not doing that. Oh, I should give you our sort of motto in that regard is RFR's goal is to provide hope, healing, and support for people struggling with issues of doubt or non-belief. Right. So on occasion, and this is rare, but somebody will call in complaining about their specific church, meaning congregation, if not religion. And we actually have resources to help somebody find one that fits them better. If that's what they want to do, we'll do that. It's a very minor thing that happens, but it does.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that people who are um, still questioning or still happy to believe, but are just having uh, sort of more local issues, would call an explicitly uh, atheists, or doubting skeptic hotline. That interests me. And
Yeah. We'll get. What do you do here? What's the point? Yeah, right. And I have had some. I'll tell you about the funniest one I ever had. This was somebody who called. He had stereotypically Southern U.S. accent. And I want to tell you people. I won't do the accent. I want to tell you people that Mormons are not Christians. I go, okay, did someone tell you you're supposed to call and teach us? It's like that's. I didn't think that was what we did, and he was going on about why Mormons aren't Christians, and okay, let's talk about the no true Scotsman fallacy. And I started to try to go down that path, but everyone thinks someone in the organization that doesn't agree exactly with them isn't in the organization. So, whatever. And he had none of that. So it lasted maybe 5 minutes, and finally he said, "You're one of those goddamn atheists, aren't you?" And hung
oh, he hung up. Okay.
up. He hung up. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting. And so I assume you also get people who intentionally are trying to troll you or or witness to you or whatever, because I know that as just as
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
humanist,
Yeah.
I get not only email, but I get handwritten letters from religious people trying to convince me that they're right.
Handwritten. Wow, what century are they living in? Well, yeah. So we've had one person, and I'll give his name because he's called Talk Heathen several times. Kirk, Kirk the Lutheran, I think is what they label him as. And he called me, and I had a whole hour conversation with him. And I told him about the show. He had never heard of it, and he called in. So they can thank me for that. He called in the shows several times. And his deal was to preach his specific flavor of Lutheranism, which I had never in fact heard of. Uh, I think it's an extreme minority viewpoint in that larger religious view to me, and to other people. He called several of us. Yeah, he did that. He was a young Earth creationist. Is a young Earth creationist, and yeah, his mindset was bizarre to me in that he recognized all the science and it seemed exactly right about the age of the universe and biological evolution, whatever, but he knows it's wrong. How do you know it's wrong? Because you could, and he kept quoting this mantra of his indoctrination in his particular flavor of Lutheranism, which was, you can be something, I'm quoting this wrong, but the flavor is, you can be wrong because of your own brain, but only right because of the help of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So because he had the Holy Spirit, he knows that all that science is wrong, even though his brain is telling him it's right. And so we argued nicely because he was asking about, how we know evolution is real and whatever, but mostly he wanted to talk about that principle and that's unfalsifiable, what he said about, you can only know the truth, you got the Holy Spirit. Okay, how do you know you got the Holy Spirit? Like, what does that mean? Why do people think they have it when they don't have it and deconvert later? So we got into those kinds of conversations. And it seemed to stick because, well, it seemed to, I'll say, because he then changed his questioning, but then the next time he called in, he just kept pursuing it. And he hadn't called us in a few months, and just this week he did again. So it's clear he's not done.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I imagine that there are probably other hotlines that are also seeking to reach out to doubters, but to try and keep them in the fold. Are you aware of competition?
No, that's a good point, and I've not heard of that specifically, so I don't know. Can't talk to them. That's interesting.
Because I know, I mean, I don't want to. I mean, it's a not a perfect analogy, but like people, uh, young women who are pregnant and don't know what to do would ideally want to call a helpline that would help them figure out what they should do in a sort of rational and objective sort of way. But then there's the birthright sort of hotlines that'll masquerade as uh, neutral help, but then strongly try and strongly discourage abortion. So
Mm.
I wouldn't be surprised if there are there are even if there aren't today, there'll be some religious organization that gets the brainstorm that they should try and mimic what you're doing, but try and
Yeah, that would not surprise me that if there are things like that, hasn't come up either by a caller or us talking about it. So I don't know. Hmm. Yeah. So one of the things we typically do, and you mentioned the resources, is we'll point people to resources. We have a whole team of people now that curate. People suggest, hey, I saw this YouTuber. He seems to be really good about debunking religious science claims or whatever. And so the team will go and investigate the stuff. And if we agree, if that team agrees that this is a good resource to give to people who are searching and questioning, we put it on our site where now we can point people to it. So basically there's a button that says resources at the very top of our page. And that then goes to another page which asks questions or asks you what kind of things you're looking for. And you basically can go down the path and you'll find something, a page which will say, okay, if for this issue, we recommend this kind of a thing. And those could be anything from a book that you'd have to get in the library to buy to, just videos that are available or online or articles that have been published about those sorts of things. And also we're free to suggest our own things. Like, before joining RFR, I was listening to a lot of humanist and atheist content creators. So I know a lot of the names and whatever, so I can, recommend certain people to these people who are looking for something. Dark Matter 2525 comes up a lot. Thomas Westbrook, who's Holy Kool-Aid, the genetically modified skeptic. There's people I know personally, those last two, so I recommend them. And then there's things with specific religions. There's a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses coming out, so we recommend those people too.
oh, so you can customize
Yeah,
the support to the faith tradition someone's emerging out of.
yeah. So we actually have, so we can, if you're on a computer, not if you've answered something on the phone, but if you're chatting or you've taken the call on the computer, at the same time, we can open our application and go into what we call our library. And this is another area where teams have put together information for all sorts of categories, questioning this or questioning that, or Pascal's wager or whatever. And then you can quickly find a resource to either talk about or give a link if we're in chat directly to somebody. So we can also take in, if it's like a phone call, we can take an email and then we can send links to people. The organization does. We don't directly do it. Every time someone calls in, we make a report, and that goes into a form in the database, and there's another team that goes through that every time a new one is added, or maybe periodically on hourly basis or at least a daily basis, and sees what needs to be done and sends email requests. So one of the bigger things that we started within the last 5 years, I think it is our helpline community. And I often recommend people join that.
Can you say that again? The help?
Yeah, it's a helpline community, or I think it's been renamed the online community. It was originally associated with the helpline, but now it's kind of separate. You can get there by, you cannot find this on the internet. You cannot Google RFR or whatever to find it, because we don't want trolls. We talked about trolls before. And that is somewhat of a problem. I'm going to go on a tangent here. If you go to like the Atheist Experience Discord server or any other humanist groups or Facebook groups, they're not so well controlled, I would say, as ours is. In other words, you can find them on the internet. You can just say you're an atheist and join, and you might be somebody trying to deconvert to reconvert somebody, right? Or you might be an angry atheist. And I've had calls like this, where someone called and said, I went on this group on this website and I called myself an agnostic. I'm not ready to use the atheist word. I don't know if I ever will be. We can get into a debate about what those two things mean, but they just didn't like the atheist word, and they were lambasted by some people in that group for not admitting they're atheists, and then they left. So we're more moderated than that, and we try to be a more welcoming community. You can't just join us by clicking a link and finding us on the internet. So therefore, we have more control over who's in the group, and we feel it's a more welcoming environment than some others. And yes, you can only be invited after a chat or a call to an agent like me. We'll take your email address and send an invitation.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So you end up screening people into this support.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's particularly important because we have an ex-Muslim. So when you're in the online community, we have something like 25 different chat areas. They're broken up by ex-religions or other topics of common interest, perhaps. So there's ex-Muslim, ex-Catholic, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. But then there's also things like LGBTQ, um, military, Black non-believers, people who have empowered women, people who have a specific thing like that that they want to talk about in common. Um, yeah, so that's one of the things that's really helpful, that we can put people in these kinds of groups and have, in that case, it's mostly peer support from other people who have the problems, but agents like myself moderate it, to make sure everything's going good, and to sometimes spur on conversation, or to provide resources if people have gone down a certain path of questioning certain things.
And beyond this community that's focused on the callers, is there a way for you volunteers to communicate with each other and compare notes and
Yes, yes, there's a lot of that. We have video meetups. We have chat areas just for us volunteers. It's called supporters, so we can talk to each other. There's one separately for just, hey, what'd you do over the weekend, versus I had a trouble with this caller. What's your suggestions? That what could I have done differently, or whatever. Yeah, and that's pretty well organized. Yeah, one of the things your organization thinks is very important is that self-care, which I guess is a big word in therapy or whatever, so that you don't get overwhelmed. And we've had some very difficult calls. We've had people call on the verge of suicide, cross-referred them to suicide hotlines and stuff, but sometimes that's kind of traumatic to the people taking the call. So yeah, but one of the nice things is, once we've invited the people to this online community, besides it just being a place where you can text chat with each other, mostly because of the pandemic, actually, we have gone a large way to being virtual Zoom organization for meetings. So we have, I think it's bi-weekly, virtual support groups, run by people trained to do that sort of thing. Then we have every week, it's just a virtual hangout. Either agents and or clients can we all Zoom just like this, and we all just talk amongst ourselves for a couple of hours, and that's really helpful. Oh, I should mention the other thing the organization has is meetups. Is meetup.com. I don't think you guys use that service, but a lot of
no, we do.
Oh, you do? Okay, cool. So a lot of organizations use that. I mean, it's free to use it. I guess as a company you pay something, but when you're a member, you just want to join, right? I don't think there's a charge for that. So RFR has a huge number of organizations with trained staff members as support group leaders across the country. So that's one of the things available from our main side. It says find a group near you, and you click a button and you say, okay, this is my zip code, like who's around here. And in pre-pandemic days, and hopefully not too soon from now, you're trying to find a place you can drive to on a routine basis. But because most everyone is just meeting over Zoom right now, you can check in with any of them across the whole country. In fact, there are some in other countries if you'd like to join them and have chats. So yeah, and one of the other things we've done, because of the push to do everything remotely, just about the same time, a few weeks, I think, after the pandemic started and everything was locked down, we started these things called RFRX, as in xylophone, kind of a play on, I think, TEDx meetings. We do this weekly, every Monday, and we get a professional to come in. They talk for maybe half hour, 40 minutes, and there's a Q&A. And then there's been up to 100 and over people on those sessions. And then after the Q&A, sometimes the presenter leaves, sometimes they hang out for a while, but all of the clients can talk amongst themselves. And that has literally gone on to, like, we started, the whole thing starts at 8 o'clock Eastern every week. I've been on till 2 in the morning. I'm one of the social hosts. So yeah, people like to talk these days, especially because of the pandemic, and they can't get out in person to see anybody. But this gives a nice forum for people to talk about these kinds of issues. And it's interesting because people have made friends across countries this way that they never would have met before.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the thing. One of the main purposes behind Red Bank Humans also is just to connect people. And then if people want, they can meet for coffee in normal times, or agree to have a phone call or Zoom session of their own in order to continue, building those friendships. But we can be the, uh, the meeting place, the sounding board, the bringing people together, and that's what one of the things that
Absolutely.
we're all
And like this is being recorded, so we record all of those, and we don't record the social part of it for the hours and hours after the person has given the presentation and the Q&A. But the presentation itself and the Q&A are all then uploaded to YouTube. So we have our own YouTube channel Recovering from Religion, as you might suspect. And there's a playlist there called RFRX. And there are, I'm looking at it right now on my screen. It doesn't give me a number. Something like, oh, there we go. There's 31 entries right now. Some of them actually are still being edited and added from the previous few weeks. So the topics are, I'll read some of them. Maintaining mental health during social distancing. That was appropriate. That was actually the first one. Psychology of religious trauma. That's a big issue. If you've not heard of RTS, religious trauma syndrome, a lot of our callers fall into that category. Grief without God. We had David Warnock, Dying Out Loud, thriving in a mixed secular religious relationship. I get a lot of calls like that. So this is, in addition to our online webpage resources, I will now often point people to this one playlist and say, hey, there has to be something in here that's appropriate, for what you're doing, and you can listen to a professional talking about it. Hope in a Godless World, a better life, without God, mind control, don't let whatever. So, specifically on certain religions, Jehovah's Witnesses, we had Lloyd Evans, who's a pretty famous ex-Jehovah's Witness with his own YouTube channel. Mandisa Thomas from Black Non-Believers, she's had several talks. Yasmin Mohammed, who's a person who left Islam bravely, and she told her story. Yeah.
And those are recorded talks.
Those are all recorded talks available on the Recovering from Religion website and the RFRX playlist.
And is that, I got a question in the chat, is that open to anyone, or do we?
Yes. Yep. It's public YouTube.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. There's also another playlist there called Faces of RFR, which is they interviewed people like me. Actually, I was interviewed, but it's not up online yet. But there's about 10 of them, I think. So to give people an idea of what's the mindset of people who volunteer for the organization, it might be helpful if you are thinking of volunteering. Tells what people's backgrounds are, what their deconversion story was, and what they're doing in the organization. So that's kind of an interesting look.
That sounds great. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to a broader Q&A. If you're up for that, Rob?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so those of you listening can now be active participants. I believe that you should be able to unmute yourselves. If you seem to have trouble with that, just say something in the chat, and I'll endeavor to fix that. And since we have we're at the hairy edge of it, but I think we have an opportunity to let this be self-policed. So I'm going to let people unmute themselves at will. Feel free to raise your hand if you want me to try and direct attention to you. But we should also, I think this can be pretty natural flow. So we'll try that first. And I guess we'll start with Beata then.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, is there any way you can measure a success rate? Do people call you, I would call it in that case, people that actually call you and thank you for initiating the further development for them toward or away from religion?
That's a good question. We don't specifically, because we don't want to tie people down. Except to send people needed resources or an invitation to our online community, we don't have a way to specifically follow up. So I can't give you, solid statistics on it. But I will say we have a large number of volunteers who called in as clients initially, and in some cases are still in the online community, like, helping each other out in that way, and also now volunteer on the helpline. So they've pushed past that. Yeah, one of the amazing stories is the person who when I mentioned the one person who was running everything and then stepped down, and then we split it up into a bunch of jobs. So a young man took his job, still in college, for just the helpline community part. So he coordinates the volunteers who do the phones and the chats, and he's going to he's in the last year of his studies at a Mormon university, and he would be kicked out if they found out that he was a non-believer. Never mind, helping in such a significant way in recovering from religion. Yeah. So and he called. So he actually, I heard him on the Atheistic Speak, called in as a believer to the Atheist Experience some years ago, and in that very call, Matt Dillahunty answered a question, and he said, "You just convinced me I'm an atheist." It was one last thing that was hanging over him, and yeah, that was kind of cool. I remembered listening to it when I first talked to him in person in RFR. I didn't realize it was him, and then when he said it and he told me the episode, I was, oh yeah, I was listening to that live. I remember that, and and that one call was enough to push him over the edge, and now he is a significant part of helping run our community. It's amazing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I've had calls myself where I took a call from a client, and within a few months of being in the helpline community, they were in a good enough place where they decided they wanted to give back and be a volunteer too. So that's a nice feeling.
Yeah, that's great. Other questions?
I could point out an interesting thing, because I've presented at your organization on the whole scientific skepticism angle, right? So that's a thing, right? Because you could not believe in a deity but believe in all other paranormal, I'll say, bullshit. But people don't take it as bullshit. To them, it's just as real as religion is to people who are theists, and that's sometimes an issue, because we'll get people talking about those sorts of topics. So we've actually recently created a channel for people to discuss this called New Age, and yeah, I'm not as adamant about not pushing back on that as I am on religious belief. But so that's an interesting thing that comes up, because people will often leave a mainstream religion with paranormal beliefs because, hey, it's all supernatural, and although then they've chucked the thing about the Bible being right, they'll still believe all the other stuff, and that's an interesting area of conversation with some of these people.
Do you have a certificate or training, or what do they do in the organization in terms of the people that answer these calls?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Eric alluded to that earlier. I might as well go down the path of how we get trained. So the current system is, I started to mention, you watch all the videos, right? And then when you've done that, now you take a quiz. So you answer the questions, and depending how you answer, you're going to go on to the next step or not. I don't know what happens if you don't, if you watched all the videos and you still say, hey, I want to deconvert everybody who calls, probably don't go to the next step. But assuming you do that right, and you've understood what the goal is and how we're going to do it, then you get an individual one-on-one trainer, someone who is very experienced. They'll have a long discussion with you. They'll put you through practice chat and or calls, like role playing, right? And then once that's done, we go through. You sort of graduate there, and then we'll give you to another person who's a hero supporter. That's another class of things, which you go for another set of training with this other person. And then once that happens, and both the trainer and the person being trained is satisfied that they're okay with going to the next step, then they're given access to look at the ongoing chats and to listen into calls to get some more experience, right? And then the next step is, okay, I think I'm ready to try that. Let me do one, and they get monitored. So that's basically the process.
No licensing.
No, we're not therapists. It's a peer-to-peer network.
How do you caveat that with people that call in, looking for therapy?
Oh, we'll tell them we're not therapists, and then we suggest the Secular Therapy Project, which actually has certified therapists. Yeah, and that is something that we have to be aware of, that we're not counselors, we're peer-to-peer support. And if it's somebody who needs more than that, we definitely ask them, do they have a therapist? Are there problems with them? If there are, we'll recommend the Secular Therapy Project. And if not, we'll just go on to the other subjects. Part of the problem with any kind of therapist that's not trained in religious matters, well, I'll go right to the suicide helpline. We had somebody call on the verge of suicide, and we're trained to give them the suicide prevention hotline numbers or whatever. And they go, I don't want to talk to those people. I already talked to those people. I have issues about religion, which is why I'm at this point, and they don't know anything about religion, don't care. So that's a problem. Like, people say, well, you should hang up on them and have them call the suicide helpline. But if that's not what they're looking for, that doesn't help at all. So we make sure they know what the number is. In case you read the number back to me after I give it to you, so I know it didn't go in one ear and out the other. But we'll then talk about their issues, like why they're having existential dread or angst because now they don't believe there's a plan, for their lives by God or whatever.
I'm sorry to push this too much. Shut me up here. I really learned a lot from this recovering from religion. I never knew anything about that. Amazing. But as you spoke, I saw the disciplines and the acolytes and the community and the structure and the organization and the function and everything. And I see everything adding up to being a religion yourself. Do you know if you've ever been classified as a religion? The RF.
Whoa! I'll give Eric to give a definition.
Yeah.
Of religion.
Well, see, the humanists are classified as a religion under the Constitution.
I don't know. Do you not pay taxes, Eric, in your organization?
So this is a long historical issue with humanism, and whether humanism should be classed as a religion either philosophically or legally or whatever. And in the more distant past, there were humanist organizations, including the American Humanist Association, that registered as a religious organization because that was sort of the option open to them. That was the only way they could really do it. There were also people within the original founders among the American Humanist Association and other related groups that felt that something more like a religion, more like a discipline, a doctrine needed to be promulgated and inculcated. But as of now, the major humanist organizations, including our RBH, are classed as educational organizations, and we fashion ourselves as being closer to the concept of a college or university rather than a religion. And educational organizations benefit from a lot of the same sort of privileges and exemptions that religions do. So that's a much better category for us. And just because an organization has either formal or informal membership requirements or credentialing or even a doctrine doesn't make it a religion. So a political party can have a doctrine, or a field of study can have a doctrine, or a profession can have a doctrine and certification, all this sort of stuff. That doesn't make it a religion.
Yeah, I don't know how you would classify an organization that takes calls to try to help people deal with issues of religion. That seems to be an extreme stretch.
Well, no, it's not really. I mean, the Constitution defines religion as any community of people that come together to serve a single purpose, which is what you are. You seem
really. So a
yeah,
sports team,
and
a
also
sports team is a religion.
Huh?
A sports team is a religion because their single
well,
purpose
no, and they
is to
have
play game.
they have a structure. They have a sports team could be a religion if they weren't for a for-profit organization that has a purpose to perform sports. They can be distinguished from one. And you have a training system for people and stuff, and you have a community. I mean, they've defined the guy on the street corner who proselytizes every day and has the same 10 people in front of him listening to him rant about Jesus. They classify him as a religion. Put a name on it. Yeah, no, literally. So that's why I was wondering if you've ever experienced that being classified as religion, and you say you haven't.
No, no. Interesting. Like, since the Satanic Temple is the only thing I know like that would classify officially a non-profit text. They got that. They went after it as a religion, and they don't have a deity. So that's interesting. They actually have no paranormal supernatural beliefs, yet they did successfully get themselves. I think it was a political statement to do it as a religion. But
Yeah, you don't need a deity to be a religion.
yeah, but a set of doctrinal beliefs or whatever. So they have their 9 principles or whatever it is. But yeah, we don't even have that. So I don't know.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. I've never had anybody call from that church.
It sounded like one to me. I just had to.
No, I've never had it.
I'm crazy
Satanist
constitution.
call. Yeah. So the other categories of people who've never called, interestingly, to me, I don't know if anyone else has gotten a call, but I've had quite a number, and since April, my number's up to something like 220 or something like that since April. People I've interfaced with, and predominantly Christian, some Muslims, one American Indian, spiritual religion, shamanistic religion, some people from Christian religious Jewish faiths. I have never had a Buddhist call. I have never had you would think it would be a huge category of people, Hindus, right? How many Hindus are in the world? No, never one. Now, I don't know. You would say, well, okay, the United States isn't predominantly Hindu, but there are a lot of Indians here. So I don't know, maybe because it's not a doctrinaire religion as the Abrahamic religions, you don't have so much trauma. I don't know for sure, but it's like interesting, but I've never had one.
Have you had calls where it's more of a political belief system that they're recovering from? Like, I would imagine there might be people who, after the events of this week, will say, it's finally dawned on me that all these lies about the are a bunch of hooey, but everybody I know, everybody in my neighborhood, in my family are diehard Trumpers, and what do I do about that?
That comes up as it's sort of similar to the discussion of other paranormal beliefs and whatever. So yeah, occasionally we've had that, and actually often from fundamentalist Christians leaving the faith, that does become a problem because they did believe that now and now they don't, or they're worrying about it, but they're and they have huge political ramifications of their belief structure, and with the rest of the family disagreeing with. That has come up in the last, well, since I've been a member of this in this trying times. Yes, that absolutely is an issue. Yeah, one thing I've not had happen, which also the anti-mask stuff, that's come up a lot, and that goes a lot. You get Christian religious fundamentalist Christians or Jews or Muslims, and it's like, whatever, God's protecting us. I don't know all the other reasons, but no, we don't have to wear masks. So yeah, and that becomes an issue. I've had people, especially as the Thanksgiving was approaching, and then Christmas. I don't like arguing with religion with them now to begin with, but now it's even worse because they're mad at me. I won't come, and I know they're not going to wear masks, and that's the reason.
Very interesting. Any other questions out there? All right. Well, we are actually approaching the noon hour, so if we don't have further questions, I'll do one last call. But if we don't have further questions, then I really want to thank you for joining us. It's been a very informative and incidentally entertaining discussion. So one last go around on questions.
Oh, I'm reading the chat, and yes,
okay.
we had one Scientologist call recently. I've always said, hey, we never have a Scientologist call, and just last week someone did. I don't know the details, but yeah.
Oh, so you didn't take that call, but
no, I saw it in the reports and people talking about it. Yeah, because we always say, how come Scientologists don't call us? Yeah, so that's what I would love to have. It's like, really, let me hear about Xenu and whatever. And your things.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you agreeing to be interviewed live on our RBH forum, and we hope to have you back before too long.
All right, yeah, thank you very much for having me. And if anyone wants to consider volunteering, you know how to do that. Volunteer button on the recoveringfromreligion.org. Thank you all.
And thank you all for joining. It looks like the weather, although cold, is reasonably sunny and brisk out there. Try and enjoy it while you can. It's been a relatively warm January, and we'll see you next time.